Hello guys, Yulia Bone over here, and we're going to continue study of macroeconomics with chapter 6, measuring the cost of living. In particular, in this chapter, we're going to talk about consumer price index or CPI. We're going to learn what consumer price index is, how to calculate consumer price index. When we're looking at this consumer price index, what does it tell us about? We're going to learn about problems with CPI. Is this problems, really, it's seriously, is it a big deal or not when we're looking at that index? We're going to compare CPI and GDP deflator, and then we're going to compare dollar value in different times. That's going to be interesting topic. And then we're going to talk about our nominal and real interest rate as well. Consumer price index is the measure that tells you how the cost of living of typical consumer is changing over time. So consumer price index is going to reflect the overall level of prices in the economy. And when we're looking at the consumer price index, is going to tell us how is the cost of living of typical consumer, not the corporations, not firms and companies, not the government, but consumers change over time. So consumer price index is calculated by Bureau of Labor Statistics. They get all the information, what is typical consumer purchase on an everyday basis. Then they put it all together, calculate the basket cost, and report us what is the inflation rate based on the consumer price index in the economy every month. So in order to calculate consumer price index, what are we going to do? First, we're going to fix the basket. Bureau of Labor Statistics is going to see what is typical consumer. Once again, typical consumer is purchasing on the everyday basis. And they do extensive surveys. They send surveys to consumers, and they ask them kind of to keep a log of everything the typical consumer is purchasing. And then they take this log and compose the basket. After Bureau of Labor Statistics figure out what is going in the typical shopping basket of consumer, they find the prices of those products, guys. And you're probably going to already at this point, you're probably thinking, well, my consumer, Miss Bones consumer basket is probably going to be very different than your consumer basket. And the question, and you're going to be absolutely right. So typical consumer basket that BLS actually using have at about 90,000 products. So 90,000 products, this is what they're dealing with, and that's how they calculate the CPI. So they go ahead and find the prices of those products. Then they compute the basket cost, and calculation of the basket cost is kind of going to be a little bit similar when we calculate it nominal and real GDP. We're going to look at the example in a second. And then BLS is choosing a base year, because remember, we all the time have to have some kind of benchmark, and they calculate CPI or consumer price index. And this CPI, they say this in words over here, but CPI is going to be basket cost of the current year divided by the basket cost of a base year. And then we're going to take this multiply by 100. You probably want to write down this formula somewhere. So to calculate CPI for a certain year, we need to take basket cost of that year that you want to calculate CPI for and divide by the basket cost of a base year. Multiply by 100, and this is going to be your CPI index. And then we're going to use CPI index to calculate inflation rate. And this formula is going to be very similar of how we use to calculate inflation rate using GDP deflator. The only thing we're going to use CPI index. So here's our very simple example. So in our very simple economy, consumer is going to buy only two goods, pizza and latte. And if you're going to pay attention, guys, over here, do you see that quantities are actually fixed in our basket? And this is one of the things that we need to remember about calculating CPI. When Bureau of Labor Statistics chose this base year, they're going to use the quantities of a base year when they calculate consumer price index. So this is a benchmark. We talk about the implication of this fixed basket a little bit later, but this is what we need to remember, that consumer basket is fixed. So therefore, when we calculate basket cost from year to year, quantities are not going to change. The only what we're going to take into consideration the changes in our prices. So for year 2014, basket cost of the basket, I'm going to put it right now, cost of the basket, and then later on I'm just usually saying basket. For year 2014 is going to be, we buying 4 pizzas and the price of each pizza is $10, plus in our very simple economy consumer purchasing 10 lattes. I need to, here we go, 10 lattes, and the price of each latte is actually $2. If we're going to calculate it, the cost of the basket is going to be $60. So if consumer wants to maintain this lifestyle, so here you go, they chose on the everyday basis in our very simple examples, very simple economy to purchase four pizzas and 4 lattes, then consumer needs to have $60 in their pocket. Guys, what do you think is going to happen with the cost of the basket in year 2015? If you're going to look at the table, and you're correct, the cost of the basket is going to increase because our prices has increased. Prices right now are higher. Quantity stayed the same, but prices are high, so therefore cost of the basket is supposed to be higher. So we have 4 pizzas that we bought. Now the price of pizza is $11, plus we have 10 lattes that we purchased, the typical consumer purchasing, and we paid $2.50 for each latte. And if we're going to calculate it, the typical consumer basket cost in year 2015 is already going to be $69. So my question is, or this is what I want you to pay attention to, for typical consumer in our very simple economy, in order to maintain the same lifestyle in 2015, we need to have more money in our pocket. If we still want to purchase these 4 units of pizza and 10 units of our lattes, this is going to be the same lifestyle. We're purchasing the same amount of goods and services. Then we need to have more money in our pocket. So, and cost of the basket for year 2016, so we're purchasing, remember, basket is fixed. BLS is going to use this fixed quantity. So it's 4 units. And we're paying right now $12 for our pizza. And then we're purchasing 10 lattes. And we're paying $3 for each latte. So remember, I'm taking this from the table. Quantities are fixed. The prices I'm taking from the table. And if we're going to calculate this, it's going to be, I believe, $78. So again, what happened in year 2016? If typical consumer wants to maintain the same lifestyle, if typical consumer wants to purchase the same amount of goods, 4 pizzas and 4 lattes, then we need to have even more money in our pocket. Remember, CPI Consumer Price Index is going to tell us that cost of typical consumer is changing over time. So in our example, cost of typical consumer has actually increased over the course of these 3 years. Next, what we're going to do, we're going to use this basket cost that we calculated, and we're going to calculate consumer price index. So I'm going to go to this next slide over there. And so on this slide, we're going to calculate our CPI. Remember, CPI is equal basket. I'm just going to write the general formula right now. Basket of the current year, basket cost of the current year over the basket of the base year. And I'm going kind of base year right here, put in the in this box over here, and remember, multiply by 100. That's our formula for consumer price index. Now we're going to start with the year 2014, and I want you while I'm writing down the formula here, I want you to go ahead and calculate in your head really quick what is going to be consumer price index for year 2014. So I all the time like to write down the formula first. So CPI for year 2014 is going to be equal basket cost. I'm just going to put basket. Remember, of the current year. What is the current year? Current year is year 2014. Basket for year 2014 divided by the basket over base year. Oh, and I don't think that I showed it over here, but base year is going to be year 2014. Okay, it was given in this example somewhere, but our 2014 is going to be our base year. Remember, multiply by 100, and now we just need to plug in the numbers. So we're going to take our $60. This is basket cost for year 2014 divided by the basket cost in the base year. What is our base year? Base year is year 2014. Therefore, we need to divide by the same cost of the basket divided by $60, multiply by 100, and we're going to get exactly 100. I hope, guys, this is a little bit familiar to you, because remember, when we were calculating GDP deflator in the base year was equal exactly to 100 as well. So remember, this year 2014, this is our base year. So CPI in base year equals 100, the same as the GDP deflator in the base year. So next one, we're going to calculate CPI for year 2015, and I'm going to write down the formula first. This is basket of our current year. What is the current year? Current year is going to be year 2015. So basket cost of year 2015, and remember, divided by the basket cost of the base year. And I'm going to write a word here, base year. That's what I usually like to do, so you can get used to it. I'm not going to put 14, I'm just going to put base year. Multiply by 100. And what are going to be our numbers? So basket cost for year 2015 is $69. Basket cost for our base year is $60 divided by $60. Multiply by 100, and if you're going to calculate it, I believe it's going to be 115. So guys, remember, CPI is an index. There is no units attached to it. So CPI, we talked about that earlier, that it shows you how cost of living of typical consumer is changing over time. Or also CPI, remember, reflects the level of prices in the economy if you compare with the base year. So our base year was a benchmark. We're looking at the CPI, and we see that CPI in year 2015 has actually increased. What is this number going to tell us? Just imagine for a second that you're an economist and you don't have this table in front of you. You don't see all that. And remember, in real life, this table is going to be so complicated that for the economist, it's going to be really, really hard to analyze. So economists are going to look just on these numbers. Economists are going to look at this number. Somebody already calculated it for them. BLS did it. So they're looking at this number and how they're going to interpret that. So they know that CPI reflects the level of prices in the economy. So the price level in our economy from year 2014 to year 2015 has actually increased because CPI is higher. Once again, economists are not going to look at these extensive tables that have thousands and thousands of products in it. They're just going to look at the end result. And when they look at the end result, CPI is going to tell us that cost of typical consumer has actually increased from year 2014 to 15 because CPI is higher. And the very last one, I'm not sure where I'm going to find a space over here. I'm going to put over here CPI for year 2016. Remember, this is basket for the current year. Current year is 16 divided by the basket of the base year. I all the time put base year over here, multiply by 100. So basket for year 2016 was 78. Basket for our base year is $60. Multiply by 100, and I believe if you calculate it, it's going to be 130. Remember, again, it's an index. There's no percentage here. There is no dollar signs, no units attached. Once again, what is this going to tell this 130? If you're an economist and you're just looking at these numbers, you're just looking at the CPI, here you go, you're actually looking just at these numbers. Okay, just at the results. You're looking at 100, 115, and 130. If you're an economist and you know what CPI is telling you about, what kind of conclusion are you going to say to make? You're going to make a conclusion that the cost of living of typical consumer has actually increased, or you're going to make a conclusion that price level in our economy from year 2014 to 15 to 16 has actually increased. So in order for us to maintain the same lifestyle for typical consumer, we need to have more money in our pockets if we still want to purchase the same amount of goods and services. One last thing in this video. So here's our CPIs that we just calculated. What are we going to do? We're going to use this in order to calculate inflation rate. And inflation rate, I'm going to write down just regular formula between year 1 to year 2 is going to be CPI year 2 minus CPI year 1 and divided by CPI year 1. Remember the same formula as if we were calculating inflation rate based on or using GDP deflator. The only thing we're using CPI over here. So let's keep going. We're going to calculate first inflation rate. Actually, can we calculate inflation rate for year 2014 between 13 and 14? And the answer is no, because we don't have the information for year 2013. So therefore, we're going to calculate inflation rate for year 2015, or if you want to write it between 14 and 15. Remember, this is our year 1, this is our year 2. So I'm going to write down the formula first. So we have CPI year 2, it means year 15, minus CPI year 1, that is our year, let me see, 14, minus CPI for year 1, that is year 14, and multiply by 100. Guys, remember, inflation rate the first year after the base year is all the time easy to calculate. There is no reason you can make mistakes here. So we have 115 minus 100 divided by 100 to get a percentage, multiply by 100, and therefore it's going to be exactly 15%. So therefore inflation rate for year 2015 was 15%. So the cost of living of typical consumer increased exactly by 15%. And the next inflation rate is going to be between years 15 and 16. Remember, this is year 1, this is year 2. Now I'm going to write down the formula. I'm all the time telling my students, please write down the formula with the variables first and then put the numbers in. So CPI for year 16, because this is our year 2, minus CPI year 15, divided, guys, by CPI year 15. Please pay attention over here. Very common mistakes where students take over here and they take CPI of the base year. Such a common mistake. I all the time telling them, please pay attention, and they still come to me during the exam and during the quizzes. Oh, I can't get the right answer. Well, because you need to use over here CPI of your year 1, and right now it's year 15. Now multiply by 100. What do we have? We have 130. Remember, this is all we calculated these indexes in the, on the previous slide. So we have 130 minus 115 divided by 115. Common mistake, you put 100 over here. Multiply by 100, and inflation rate is going to be 13%. Maybe there is some change over here, but we're going to round. It's 13%. So therefore, the cost of living of typical consumer has increased between these 2 years, year 15 and 16, has increased by 13%. If typical consumer wants to maintain the same lifestyle, to buy the same amount of goods and services, they need to have more money in their pocket. That's all for this video. We'll go to the next one.